Shalom, 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 shalom. First and foremost, giving infinite praises, glory, and honor unto Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushua, Ba'ashem, Rachakodash, giving double honor to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone and shalom and salutation to all you sensei Akim across the four winds, pushing this truth with sincerity of heart. I'm your fellow servant, Kasamagan from the DC camp, coming at you through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushua, Ba'ashem, Chakodash, for the elect. Now, this lesson, Lord willing, it'll be a quick one. I'm trying to touch on the topic of a particular book, which is the book of Daniel, the 5th chapter, which it goes into the writing on the wall, so like the writing on the wall, and dealing with Babylon the Great, aka the United States of America. We understand that the United States is a reincarnation of Babylon. It's the reincarnation of all of these major empires. But in this case, it's a reincarnation of Babylon. It's known as Babylon the Great. And, I want to touch on a time where basically the writing is going to be on the wall for Babylon. All right? When is going to be that moment, basically, just like in Daniel's, the 5th chapter. So without further ado, this is Daniel's, the 5th chapter, subtitle, Belshazzar's Feast. All right, it says, Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. By the way, well, actually, it's going to say it. It says, Belshazzar, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels, which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. All right. And really, first, of course, you must acknowledge that Belshazzar was the son of Nebuchadnezzar. And by the time Nebuchadnezzar died, Belshazzar, although he was taught by his father the things that happened during his rulership and the what Daniel had done for him, Belshazzar, just like the majority of princes, they always forget, right? They always forget what their fathers went through. You could say something similar to Rehoboam. All right, Rehoboam totally forgot what Solomon went through, although Solomon told Rehoboam, but he didn't give a damn. And that's how the nation of Israel got basically the writing on the wall took place during Rehoboam's reign. That's when Israel got divided, and then eventually we fell into captivity. So this is a similar thing with Belshazzar, and this is where Babylon basically got taken over. And it says that, let me see, verse 3, it says, Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of Jerusalem, out of the temple of the house of the Most High, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubine drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. All right, so there was an actual hand that it really was an angel. As you read the story, basically, the angel was able to, because the angels are able to move in different dimensions, so they could be around you, but in a different dimension, so you won't see them, and they could basically have their hand kind of go into the third dimension, just manifest in the third dimension, which we are in that third dimension. So they could do that. So when you see something like that, that's going to freak you out. Right? You see a hand writing something, that's going to freak the hell out of you. So verse 6, it says, the king's countenance was changed. Right? Yeah, the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loose. All right, so his hips were loose, basically. All right, his hips got dislocated, which that's crazy. It says, and his knees smote one against another. So his for your knees to smite against each other like that, that means he had his hips with dislocated off of that fear. All right, so for what he witnessed. But now the main point that I want to focus on is verse 2, right, when it says Belshazzar, while he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessel, which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple. Now, I want to focus on the gold and the silver vessels, right? Because basically what that represents, right? It represents, of course, the nation of Israel, but deeper, when you really go deeper, it also represents, um, the elect. All right, you're talking about the 144, the 1/3. All right, and basically, how do you able to prove that? Let's go to first. We have to establish that the vessels, all right, vessels. When you talk about vessels of gold and silver, now that's the physical aspect, all right. But you also have, well, that's the natural aspect of a vessel. But then you also have the spiritual aspect of a vessel, which are actual people. This is the parable of the 10 virgins. It says, "Then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened unto 10 virgins, which took their lamps and went forth to meet the bridegroom. And 5 of them were wise, and 5 of them were foolish." And we already know this breakdown is talking about the difference between the elect and the 2/3, the 1/3 and the 2/3. All right. It says, "They that were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them, but the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps." See, in their vessels, all right? And that oil is talking about this truth, this gospel, the name of Yahweh Shemel Shah, the 100% truth. And our vessels, the scripture said we have this treasure in these earthen vessels, all right? So these are earthen vessels. So now when you go back to Daniel chapter 5, verse 3, and it says, then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of the Most High. So what are the vessels that are taken out of the temple of the Most High, the temple of the house of the Most High? First of all, you have vessels that were taken out of the house of the Most High, which Israel was, in that time, Judah, the kingdom of Judah, was taken out from Jerusalem and were brought to be slaves, captive under the Babylonians. But now out of the house of Israel, you have the temple that's within, because you have the land of Israel, then you have the temple that's within the land of Israel. So who were the ones in the temple? Those back then were the Levites. All right. But now we know, fast forward, under Melchizedek, the order of Melchizedek, guess what? The priest could come out of the 12 tribes. All right. The priesthood are represented out of the 12 tribes. So the golden vessels, the vessels in the temple of the house of the Lord, it's talking about the elect. So basically, when this fool Belshazzar, because he already had Judah, Judah in captivity. But when this fool went into the house of the Lord and took his physical vessels and drank out of it, and basically gave glory to other gods, the disrespect, right? Because he got so close to, artifacts that are precious to the Lord. All right, because he already had Judah, but when he got close to the artifacts that were precious to the Lord said, "Okay, that's enough." And then that's when he gave the order to the angels to write, basically to put the writing on the wall that, okay, that's enough for Babylon. All right, I'm done with you. You're done, basically. All right. So now, let me see. Let's go to another example. This is Romans chapter 9 and 21. And it says, has not the power of the clay of the same lump to make one vessel unto honor and another unto dishonor? What if the Most High, willing to show his wrath and to make his power known, endure with much long suffering the vessels of wrath fitted for destruction, and that he might make known the riches of his glory on the vessels of mercy? All right, so you have vessels fitted for destruction. This is a dual. There's a dual understanding to this precept. You can primarily go with the vessels of wrath, fitted for destruction, being Esau, and then the vessels of mercy being Israel. But then the deeper meaning really is the vessels of wrath, 2/3 being destroyed, because the 2/3 of the nation of Israel, so-called Negroes, Hispanics, and Native Americans, are going to be destroyed here in Babylon the Great. And then you have the vessels of mercy. All right, the Israelites, those vessels out of the temple, the precious artifacts of the Lord that will receive mercy. So the way that the Lord cares about the elect is different than the way that he cares about the 2/3. There's a reason why when this fool Belshazzar, which he was told by his pops Nebuchadnezzar to stay away from us, But again, that's how the princes always did. They kind of, didn't take their father's word seriously, and they're usually the ones that bring down the kingdom by their foolish ways, right? It's always the foolish prince that will bring down his kingdom. But the main point is that those vessels, all right, those vessels, and let's add. This is the book of Ezra. This is the book of Ezra, chapter 7. All right, and it actually goes to what happens later. We're just gonna go to the point. This is Ezra chapter 7 and 19. It says, "The vessels also that are given thee for the service of the house of thy power, those deliver thou before the power of Jerusalem." All right, so the service of the house. So who are the servants of the Lord? It's the prophets. All right, it's the elect, beginning with the 144, which are the prophets, but it's the elect. Those are the servants. Those are the vessels, the precious artifacts of the Lord. And when you touch them and you drink off of them, meaning when Edom, the new king of Babylon, Babylon the Great, when he decides to make a move on us, primarily the men of the Lord, the elect, that's when basically Babylon the Great is going to experience its own writing on the wall, basically. All right, because again, when you get close to touching the Lord's elect, his precious artifact, his vessels of gold and silver, out of his temple, the ones who serve him, yeah, that's when the Lord is pretty much done with you. So that's when that's when America is gonna have its time. Is gonna have its own writing on the wall. So for the sake of the story, we're just gonna jump down and read, because basically Daniel shows up, kind of tells Belshazzar that you're a damn fool for not listening to your pops, and he tells him how you went out there and then let me read Daniel 5:23. But has lifted out thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives, and thy concubines have drunk wine in them, and thou hast praised the gods of silver, gold, and brass, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know, and the power in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the writing that was written: Many tekel up Harsin. And it says, this is the interpretation of the thing, many, amine, all right, however you want to say it. It says, God has numbered thy kingdom and finished it. All right. So when the persecution arises upon us, on the men of the Lord, it means that basically, the United States, Babylon the Great, has been numbered. All right. It says tekel, meaning thou art weighed in the balances and are found wanting. Meaning what? The level of wickedness is at an all-time high. All the sins have reached into heaven. It says Perez, and it says thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. All right. So as we know, in the Third World War, Babylon the Great, aka the U.S., is gonna go and fight against the modern day Medes, which are the Russians, which are the Russians, and the Persians, modern day Persians, which are the Iranians. All right, and all that, the coalition. So, but the main nations, just like back then, the Medes and the Persians took down Babylon, and this, in the end of the world, Babylon the Great, aka the U.S., is going to be basically taken down by the modern day Medes, the Russians, and the Persians, Iranians. All right, verse 29. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. Now, it's funny because now he's trying to reward Daniel, right? But the whole time, like, Media Persia was at Babylon's door, and mind you, these jokers was partying, right? Because if you read the chapter, they were partying, drinking, and having fun. And the whole time, Media Persia and Darius was at their door, ready to F them up, to take them over. All right. And this is kind of how Babylon is going. It's going out, right? Babylon is still trying to party. People still trying to get married, and they're still trying to talk businesses and so on and so forth. And when the whole time, the modern day Persians, the Russians, the modern day the modern day Medes, the Russians, and the modern day Persians, Iranians, and so on and so forth, they're preparing to shoot thermonuclear missiles on this place, according to the Bible. So verse 30, it says, "In that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old." All right, so it's gonna happen when they start moving on this, man. Which before they do that, again, there's gonna be a lot of stuff that's got to come down, the MOTB and all that. That's when they're gonna start making their moves, and when they start making their moves, the Third World War is gonna kick in, and the end of Babylon is gonna listen. The end of Babylon, surprisingly, is gonna happen a lot faster than you would imagine, right? Because Babylon, has been a thorn on our side for a very, very long time. It's been the most powerful kingdom on the planet. It's ruled with might, and it's really worn down the prophets. It's very, very hurtful, man, to live in Babylon. It really is on all levels. But when it's time for Babylon to go down, it's going to be surprisingly swift. It's not going to take 5 and 6 and 10 years. When this thing crumbles, it's going to be surprisingly swift. So now let's close out with the moment of Babylon the Great's own writing on the wall. Right, this is Jeremiah 51 and 61. And Jeremiah said to Sariah, "When thou comest to Babylon, and shalt see, and shalt read all these words, then shalt thou say, O Lord, thou hast spoken against this place, to cut it off, that none shall remain in it, neither man nor beast, but that it shall be desolate forever." All right, and that did not happen with ancient Babylon. All right, so clearly, right here, Jeremiah is speaking of a different Babylon, a future Babylon. It says, "And it shall be when thou hast made an end of reading this book, that thou shalt bind a stone to it and cast it into the midst of Euphrates." All right, and thou shalt say, thus shall Babylon sink, and shall not rise from the evil that I will bring upon her. What's the evil? The modern day Persians and the Medes, Russia, Iran, and China, in the form of thermonuclear missiles. And when that's going to happen, again, the writing on the wall is going to come when Esau goes for the artifacts, his precious artifacts of Yahweh Ba'Shem El-Shah, which are his elect. That's when he's going to experience his own writing on the wall. Verse 64, "And thou shalt say, thus shall Babylon sink, and shall not rise from the evil that I will bring upon her, and they shall be weary." Thus far are the words of Jeremiah. So that's the lesson that I had. Like I said, nothing too long. I believe, again, I just want to touch on that, on the fact that those vessels really represents the elect. And the minute that foolish Belshazzar decided to do that, but it was all set up. All right, so it was all set up for him to be foolish right at the time where their kingdom was coming to an end anyways. All right, so we know how this thing ends. We know how this story ends for Babylon the Great. We just got to continue to be faithful, continue to watch, and as eventually we're gonna be the ones on the throne. All right. So with that, I'm gonna say, Kal Halam La Yahweh Ba'Shem, Yahshua Ba'Shem, Wachakodash, giving double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone, and Shalom and salutation to all you sincere Akim across the four winds, pushing his truth and sincerity of heart. Because I'm a guy from the DC camp. Shalom.